Hello everyone, my name is Alejandro. I am a student at San Diego State and I'm studying to get my master's in rehabilitation counseling. And this video is to talk about the some psychosocial factors with the spinal cord injury population. I talked to some people at Sharp Rehab. I talked to a social worker, and I also talked to a rehabilitation RN. Both of them have about 20 years of experience with working with people with spinal cord injuries. And also I can share some personal experience. I have been in a wheelchair for 13 years from a car crash. I'm a quadriplegic. So also I can share some personal experience when it comes to this subject. Right off the bat, I would like to start out with, in the book, in the handbook, it mentions that people who are getting a spinal cord injury are in the age group of 16 to 30 years old. And it's mostly men that are getting injured instead of women. I think it's about 80% men. Compared to women, and that's mostly because just men are making bad decisions, are driving recklessly, not wearing their seatbelts, diving into shallow water, getting into fights, all that stuff. Pretty much men are not thinking twice about it, and that's why you see more of a higher range or percentage of men getting injured instead of women. And I pretty much, when I talked to the social worker and the RN nurse, they pretty much just they mentioned that between kids and older adults, I mean, both groups have a hard time adjusting to it, adjusting to a new lifestyle. It's like a 180. It's a total 180 on your life. But I've even noticed it that the younger population has a, I don't want to say easier way, but I mean, they can cope with it better than when compared to an adult. I've seen it when I've gone to mentor a couple patients when I go into the rehab center, and I've talked to kids, I've talked to adults, and when I talk to adults, you notice that it's a lot more harder for them, because, I mean, I can understand, because they're 40, 50 years old, they're the breadwinners in the family, they're the ones taking care of the whole family, and now it's totally opposite. Now that they're dependent on people, they're not used to the fact that somebody has to take care of them. Also, they're worrying about who's going to pay the bills down in the family, since they're not going to be able to work while they're in the hospital. So I've noticed that definitely in the younger population, they can adjust to it a little bit more faster compared to an adult. I mean, adults do adjust to it, but I mean, it takes more time. I've noticed a couple, I've noticed kids that it does take a while for them too, but compared to adults, it takes a longer time. I think I've been mentoring probably about 8 years. I think of the 8 years, I've seen probably only one. He was, I think, like 19. And he was a motorcycle accident. He was out in the desert, and he jumped. He was in his quad. He jumped like a little sand dune, and he didn't notice that once he jumped on one side, that on the other side it was like a 30 or 40 foot drop. So once he jumped in his ATV and noticed that it was totally 40 feet deeper on the other side, he went flying out. So he sustained a spinal cord injury and ended up being a paraplegic. But I mean, like I was back to my point is that that's probably the only person that I've noticed that you're probably in the hospital after sustaining a spinal cord injury. I would say no more than 2-3 months. And that's including hospital, and then you transition over to the rehab center where you're learning PT, OT, speech therapy, recreational therapy, all that stuff. And he was pretty much, I think, 2 months and a half at rehab. And right when he got out of rehab, he went back to school. And I mean, I've pretty much never seen nobody done that before. I've seen people, I'm going to take a year off, or I'm going to take a year off work, or maybe 6 months or 2 years, you name it, just to get used to the fact that I'm going to be pretty much the rest of my life in a wheelchair. And this young guy, pretty much just very recent to his injury, just went back to school at the snap of his fingers. I mean, I don't know if I would be able to done that myself, but also on the good side, he was also a paraplegic, so he was a little bit more independent compared to like a quadriplegic. So, but I think one of the reasons also he went back to school immediately is because he had a scholarship, I think, at MIT, so he didn't want to lose his scholarship. So that's probably the only person I've seen just like right as soon as he got discharged, he just dove in back to having a active lifestyle. I mean, I've seen, like I told you guys, I've seen people where they say, well, I'm going to take a year off, 2 years off, or I'm just going to focus on my PTOT right now. I'm not even going to worry about school or work. But like I'm going back to the topic that I've seen the younger population adjust more easier or more faster to compared to an adult that's 40, 50 years old when they both have sustained a spinal cord injury. I've noticed that factor. Also, another factor that I've noticed is that people who have a good family support tend to do a lot better than somebody that's, let's say, an only child, and maybe he got a spinal cord injury at the age of 30 and probably he's not married. Only child, he's not married. Both of his parents have passed away, and he has nobody that he can talk to, or has nobody that can come visit him at the hospital, or just even go visit him at home, or just go out and have fun. I've noticed that for my personal experience, my family still is a huge part of my life after my spinal cord injury. I know that after sustaining my spinal cord injury, it definitely brought my family a lot closer. I'm very close to my mom, very close to my sister. I do know that if it wasn't for my mom, I probably wouldn't be the person that I am now. She was my rock. But I've noticed that also when I go to talk to patients, and when I go in there and visit them in the hospital, I noticed that I kind of noticed that their support system, if the family's there, if their mom, dad, sister, brother, cousins, even close friends, if they're there, I noticed that they tend to adjust a little bit better because they have that somebody to talk to and just have a shoulder to cry on and talk about their experiences, about their new lifestyle they're trying to adjust, and it's kind of hard. And just having somebody to talk to is very important. So I have noticed that the support system, the family system, even the friendship system is very important when it comes to a spinal cord injury. It helps a lot. I can see a difference when I've gone to talk to a couple people that, for example, they're not even talking to their family members because even they've had problems before their accident and they don't even talk. So once the injury happens, they're not talking, so they don't have that support system with the family. Also, with family members, besides having a good support system, more than likely, once you get out of hospital, once you get discharged, they're probably going to be your caregivers for the first few months while you just try to get adjusted, and hopefully you have enough movement in your arms to be independent, where you can transfer on your own, you can get dressed, you can take a shower, all that stuff. So going back to the family system, the family support, it's very important. I mean, not only for just like I told you guys, just to talk to somebody, but also more than likely they're going to be your caregiver. So it's good to have a good communication with your family, just to talk about stuff about you're going through, or more than likely, like I said, they're going to be your caregiver for a while. Also, I've noticed that depending on what culture you're from, families tend to be a little bit more overprotective. Myself being from the Mexican culture, I do notice that that my mom, pretty much at the beginning of my injury, my mom, my sister, my friends, all my relatives, they were very overprotective. Some of them still are, even though I'm post-injury 13 years. But I mean, at the beginning, it was crazy. I mean, they didn't even want me to lift up my hand so I can scratch my face because they wanted to do it for me. And that's pretty common in the Mexican culture because, I mean, families tend to overprotect somebody that has a disability because they don't want you to struggle. They don't want you to get tired, or you name it. Pretty much, that's very common with the Mexican culture, or even the Hispanic culture. That's very common. That parents or even brothers, siblings tend to overprotect. So it's pretty common. So just this video is to inform us as rehab counselors in the future, if you guys should ever have a client that has a spinal cord injury, to kind of understand where they're coming from, kind of put yourself in their shoes. Also to see what culture they're from, if they're from the Hispanic culture, if they're from the Caucasian culture, just to do a good intake, try to establish that bond with your client so you can kind of understand where they're coming from. Also, kind of understand that when you get a client, maybe, well, if they come to see us, that's probably a good thing because they want to they want to go on with life. So that's a good sign when they come to see us. But kind of understand if they're not fully motivated to probably, get a job or go back to school. They might be thinking, I don't want to go back to work because probably if I go back to work, they're going to treat me differently, or they're going to feel sorry for me, or I might not be able to do the work or the job that I used to do before my injury because maybe I used to be I used to work with my hands. I used to be a carpenter. I used to be an architect. I used to draw. And now they're maybe a quadriplegic, so maybe they can't move their arms or their hands. So they might going to have to be able to look for another job, or maybe they can take a couple of tests to see what their good and what their strengths or their weaknesses are, so they can find probably another job that suits them better, or maybe if they can do some accommodations in the job they used to have, so now they can be able to do it. Also, going back to the point that they might come to see us, that's a good thing. But also taking consideration that some people, after they leave the hospital, they stay home. They don't want to go out. They don't want to go out into the community. They don't want to have people stare at them, have people make comments, have them treat them differently. I mean, we all know as rehab counselors not to make assumptions. Just because somebody's in a wheelchair doesn't mean. Some people might think that they have a brain injury, that they have an intellectual disability, or you name it. So pretty much never make assumptions, never judge a book by its cover. Pretty much, if you're in this field, we all know this. So also, if you have a client that's a little bit more on the defensive side, kind of don't take it personally. Just kind of understand that that's pretty much all the based on their experiences that they had before or after the injury, that people judge them, people make comments, people treat them differently, especially if it's a cultural thing. Coming from a Mexican culture and also relating to the Hispanic culture, I know every time I go to Mexico or pretty much Mexico, because I haven't traveled anywhere in South America, but I would imagine it's pretty much the same. When I go to Mexico, it's a whole nother world when I go down there. I mean, people give me these looks. They treat me very differently. Because pretty much people in the Mexican culture and the Hispanic culture, people with disabilities over there are pretty much seen as less of a person because they've never seen somebody that is pretty active, I mean, or goes to school, goes to work. Because over there, pretty much, I would say pretty much all of it's not accessible. They don't have the ADA law over there. So pretty much people with disabilities over there in Latin America pretty much can't do nothing with their life. So pretty much they're used to either the family taking care of them their whole life, or if that's not an option, pretty much they're homeless, asking for money. So when you have a client that's from that culture, don't take it personally if they're a little bit too on the defensive side, or if they're too reserved, because pretty much that's all they know after their injury. And pretty much us as rehab counselors, we can pretty much point them in the right direction, give them all the tools we can, the resources to get them active. And speaking of resources, I did find a couple on the internet that I would like to share One of them is, and I will have this also at the end of the presentation, so you guys can write them down in case I go too fast or you can't write them down. One of them is called Ability Center, and that's a vendor here in San Diego that they pretty much sell modified minivans. They also do hand controls for people with disabilities or with lower and upper extremities that have difficulty driving. So pretty much they do anything from hand controls, in minivans, in cars, they do pickups, you name it, pretty much they can put hand controls in it. So you can drive a car, you can drive a minivan. You have a lot of options. So that's one option, Ability Center. They also do sell wheelchairs. They sell power wheelchairs, manual wheelchairs, scooters. I've also seen a couple motorcycles. Don't ask me how that works, but I have seen it. They have one on display. It's a 3-wheeler. It's pretty crazy, the stuff they have out there. So that's Ability Center. Another one is Wheelchair Getaways. I like that one because that's a nationwide company. And I like Wheelchair Getaways because pretty much if you're ever going to travel and you're in a wheelchair and you can't, or if it's hard to transfer in and out of your wheelchair to like a car seat or you name it, or if you have a power wheelchair, it's pretty hard to disassemble it and then put it in the trunk of your car and all that stuff. It takes time, it takes effort, it takes energy. So to make it simple, Wheelchair Getaways pretty much has, you call them in advance, probably like a month or 2 months. And let's say you're going to San Francisco, you're going to Orlando, you're going to New York. Just give them a call and tell them, hey, I'm going to need a van for such and such date. Do you have any available? And they pretty much rent out minivans, all kinds of cars that are modified that need accessibility for a wheelchair. So I like Wheelchair Getaways also. That's nationwide. Another one is Head North, the Head North Foundation, which I like. That's a local nonprofit foundation here in San Diego. And pretty much they help out people with spinal cord injuries. They have a lot of programs. They give out grants for people that are inpatient in the hospital. I think they give out grants up to, I think, $1,000 just to help out with medical expenses, medical bills. And that's one type of grant. They have another grant that once you're out of the hospital, I'm not sure how much the grant is up to. I think it's up to a couple thousand, $2,000, $3,000 for anything regarding doing modifications on your house, to putting ramps on the doorway, making your doors a little bit wider. They do grants for that. They do grants for maybe you need a new manual wheelchair and your insurance doesn't cover it because you have an insurance that only covers a wheelchair once every 5 to 7 years or something like that. So they can give you money for wheelchairs, for modifications for your house. If you need hand controls for driving, they do also do that. Also with Head North, they do also do peer mentoring, which is great. Which is great. I definitely suggest that if you ever have a client with a spinal cord injury and is willing to talk to somebody that has a spinal cord that's been in a wheelchair probably more time than them, because I really recommend this, because who else can give you knowledge or talk to you about stuff than somebody that's been through it and has been in a wheelchair a number amount of years and probably has seen it all and can probably give you tips on that. So Head North does peer mentoring. I strongly recommend that. And they also do something that is called role models. And what they do is pretty much they pair up an adult with a younger kid. Let's say the role model would be 21 and the little kid would be probably 8 or 10, and they pair them up for like a year so they can kind of transition, kind of going back to like the mentoring, but this is a little bit more, it requires more follow through. So pretty much throughout the year, I mean, probably see them in once a month or twice a month, and then you get to go out and just pretty much talk. It's kind of like mentoring. I like it a lot. That's Head North. Also, another very good resource is the Life Goes On Foundation. They do a lot of events. I think they're based out of LA, but they do a lot of events throughout the nation. They do a lot of surfing, modified surfing. They do a lot of events out in the Bay. I definitely recommend that one. I also recommend Golden Boy Mobility, which is another vendor that sells modified minivans. Also, another good one is Access to Independence. I recommend this one a lot. They have a lot of resources with independent living, assisted technology, accessible housing, personal assistance. So I recommend Access to Independence. And also the last one I recommend is CareCure Community, which I use it a couple times. It's a forum where pretty much it's kind of like a discussion board. You pretty much, if you have any questions, you put them on there and people answer them. And people who have all kinds of disabilities, if they can kind of relate with the question, they'll answer it. I like it because it's a nationwide forum and pretty much people all over the nation answering questions. So that's my resources. And hopefully this video helps out with, if you're a client with a spinal cord injury, you can kind of know where they're coming from and the resources you can kind of give them and the tools to hopefully send them in the right way. So thank you for watching. Bye.